This is it. It's all been leading up to this. All the printing and commenting, control tree metadata, functions and variables, they've all just been pieces of the puzzle. Now we finally get to do something. Introducing the if-then statement. This is the basic decision-making component of our script. If this thing is true, do X. If that thing is true, do Y. If you press the gas, then the car goes forward. If you film this on your first take, then we don't have to come in on Saturday. Now, it may have felt like we were touching on this decision-making process earlier when we started combining the event handler and functions. After all, we were able to use the event handler to launch a function, which then performed its task. That feels like if you press the button, then the function happens. But there's no real decision-making or analysis happening here, because the function will always do the exact same thing every time the event handler is triggered, regardless of whether the button is toggling on or off. But now, with our if-then statement, we can make qualifying conditional statements. The body of an if-then statement looks like this. If, qualifying statement, then, result, end. We could use this to make sure the result only occurs under certain conditions. For instance, we previously showed you a fader that turned yellow when it reaches the top of its range. We could do this with an if-then statement like this. When controls.MrFader.EventHandler is triggered, it will start a function. If controls.MrFader.value is greater than 0, then controls.MrFader.color equals yellow. End once for the if-then statements, and then end a second time for the function. As we move the fader, its event handler is constantly triggered, but its function will only change the control's color if the control's value is in the specified range. But we don't have anything in place yet that changes the fader's color back when it returns below 0 decibels. Now, you could add a second if-then statement after the first one, which states, if the value is less than 0, then change the color to aqua. But there's a more efficient way to do this. The body of our if-then statement can also include an else. The else allows us to specify an alternative result that will occur if the qualifying statement is not met. In this case, we don't need this second if-then statement because that can be summarized with a simple else statement within the body of the first if-then statement. You can see this works perfectly. Our fader is yellow at the top of its range and aqua everywhere else. We can actually continue to modify our if-then statements with another tool called else if. These are additional qualifying statements that will be analyzed in order if the previous qualifying statement is not met. While our current simple if-then statement only has 2 possible results, the addition of else ifs can account for an unlimited number of possible results. I'll start off simple with this fader and add a third color when the control is near the bottom of its range. So I'll add an else if value is less than -40, then color is gray. Now, if the control doesn't match the first qualification of being above 10, it will check to see if it matches the second qualification of being below -40. If it is, the color is gray. If it isn't, then it defaults to the else condition of being aqua. Don't forget to use variables to your advantage too. I can make this if-then statement easier to type if I were to define a global variable at the top, such as y equals controls.MrFader. Now, I don't need to bother typing that every time. I could just use y.value and y.color, which makes it a little friendlier to read too. Also, keep in mind that this is a very simple statement. You could have multiple things occur in each of your results, targeting any number of different controls and their many control tree properties, such as their values, their strings. Or you could target one of a control's methods instead, which, as you may recall, will allow you to activate a trigger, which might be wired to something else in your design, like a snapshot. You can get very complicated with your results to make a wide number of things happen. You can also add complexity within your qualifying statements. For instance, you could specify that 2 different things must both be true with an AND statement. or that either of two things could satisfy the condition with an or statement. You could also combine these ideas together using parentheticals to make extremely specific conditions. Don't forget to use your printing and commenting tools as well. You could add a print command within the body of your result so that you have some record that it happened. This is a great way to collect proof that your function is operating correctly. And as your script gets larger, add a comment to remind yourself or someone else what each chunk of code means in layman's terms. You might also choose to reformat your script by referencing functions within your functions. For instance, this if-then statement is getting hard to read. Instead, I'll take all of result1 and define it as a named function here at the top of the script. Let's literally name this function result1. I'll then add an end to cap off this function, and then in the if-then statement, I can reference the function rather than typing all of that out. Now I'll do the same thing for result2. I'll cut it from here and redefine it here at the top of my script as its own function, and then reference that function within my if-then statement. Now, my if-then statement is much easier to read since I've replaced these long, ugly commands with the function's name, which will only be launched under the correct conditions. There's one thing you may have noticed in this last function that I should warn you about, which is the use of the double equal sign. Let's swap over to a really simple script so we can focus on this. Here I have a single button. When its value is 1, we'll print on, and otherwise we'll print off. Looks like pretty clean code to me, but in the debug window we get an error. Why is that? Well, to you and me, this equal sign makes perfect linguistic sense. If the value equals 1, do the thing. But to a computer, an equal sign is actually a call to action. This tells it to change one thing to become the other. But we don't want to change anything here. So if you're simply comparing two things, you want to use the double equal sign, which is the symbol for equivalency. In computer speak, this says, if the control's value is equivalent to 1, then we do something. This is an easy thing to get wrong when you first start writing if statements, so be careful. If we think back to the control components, you'll hopefully remember that we accomplished simple tasks using control functions. There are about 30 different functions in here, which are, in essence, pre-selected scripting blocks. The logic AND block, for instance, requires both of its inputs to have a value of 1 for its output to be 1. Well, that's the same as this if-then statement. If controls.inputs 1 and 2 are equivalent to 1, then controls.outputs.value equals 1. Else, the value is 0. So now you can probably see how these control functions are useful for simple logic paths, but they lack the customization you can implement when writing your own script. The qualifying statements and results of these control functions are set in stone and only do one thing, while a script is as flexible as you want. Finally, let's look at building if-then statements in the block controller. You'll find the if block in the flow control category. The nomenclature here is if-do, but it's the same concept. You can define your qualifying statement with the if slot and build the desired result here in the do slot. If you click on the cog icon, you can restructure the body of this block to include an else statement and as many else-if statements as you like. Just like in Lua scripting, you can stack multiple commands within each do section. You can reference other functions or variables you defined elsewhere. You can add more logic operators within your if and else-if slots for added complexity. And you can attach debug print blocks and comment blocks to keep everything organized. So, go have some fun. Return to the control worksheet and complete the if-then statement exercises, and feel free to get creative and see what else you can accomplish, incorporating all the different things you've learned in this training so far. Then move on to the next video whenever you're ready.